Good evening and welcome to this special podcast from Mountford Chambers as we celebrate International Women's Day 2024. My name is Fiona Clegg. I am one of the tenants here at Mountford Chambers and I'm joined this evening by
Renou. I'm a barrister at Mountford, joined in 2022.
Georgia-Mae Chung, a pupil at Mountford.
Fatima Jama, a first six pupil at Mountford Chambers.
Grace Khaile, and I'm a probationary tenant, having joined in September 2023.
Khaile Lennon, I joined Chambers as a probationary tenant in January of this year.
This evening we're going to have a general chat about our experiences at the bar and the various routes we've taken to be here, as International Women's Day this year celebrates the theme of inspiring inclusion. And with that, there is a real emphasis this year on considering how women are perhaps no longer playing in a male working environment and how the playing field is being levelled, and perhaps there's still some way to go, but that there has been a significant distance covered already. And with that in mind, we were interested to know your different routes to the bar and what it is that you did before joining Chambers. So perhaps if I could first of all come to you, Georgia, what were you doing before you joined Mountford?
So when I was at university, I worked part-time, I did some retail work and then also worked a bit in politics, which on the topic is very much a bit of a man's world, so that was quite an experience. Then after that I did the bar course, did some paralegaling and then worked as a legal advisor in the magistrates courts.
Fatima, in terms of you, what were you up to before you came to Mountford?
Right, so I had a very unconventional route to pupillage. You know those people that get 10 offers the first time they apply? That was not me. It took me 7 years to obtain pupillage, and each year I obtained a reserve position at different sets in London. So I spent a majority of that time developing my career at the Financial Conduct Authority. I worked in enforcement and market oversight as an investigator and also as a market watcher in the primary market oversight division. So they focus on breaches of the UK listing principles.
Now, Fatima and Georgia, not that you need reminding, you're both on your feet within the next month. Will be off to court, where at the moment the custodians of that are Grace and Chloe. So Grace, before you joined Mountford, what were you up to?
My journey is slightly unconventional. I didn't study law, I studied history and international relations. Quickly realised I wouldn't like policy because of the way it is run at the moment and having to be affiliated with a specific country and their policies, and you can't say yes or no. I then decided to go to law school, so I did the GDL, went to bar school. I was fortunate enough to get pupillage in my first round of applications. I didn't want to apply actually. Got pupillage, but I didn't get offered tenancy there, and then came to Mountford. And I say that to say that even though everyone's journey is different, just because you start earlier doesn't mean that you might not have, setbacks earlier as well. So it all looks different.
And Chloe, what did your route look like before arriving at Mountford?
Yes, well, I had a year out between school and university and did some travelling, and then went to the University of Birmingham where I studied law. During my final year I decided that I wanted to go into the criminal bar, and so after university I started bar school in London. And while at bar school, I was fortunate enough to get a pupillage offer, and I started pupillage at that set in the October after bar school. And just over a year later, I've now moved to Mountford Chambers in January of this year.
So all very different routes to arrive at Mountford. And opening this up to all of you, has your view altered of what you thought a female barrister may look like, sound like, work like, having now been in the job and the routes that you've all taken to arrive at this point?
Has my view changed of what a female criminal barrister looks like? I would say now that I'm in the profession and I know more women, yes, because I know more people and perhaps I know them individually, but I still think we have a ways to go in terms of the public perception, because not all women are represented in terms of what women look like at the bar. But I think once you get into the job, you start to see people's personalities a bit more and our different routes, which is something that's still missing, I think, in terms of public perception. So I think personally, yes, but the wider perception for those trying to come into the bar, I'm not convinced that it has changed, but people may disagree.
Well, opening that up to the rest of you, does that align with your experience? And if so, have you seen anything in practice or from discussions you may have had with your contemporaries as to how perhaps that could be altered?
I think so from my perspective, because a lot of my impression of what a criminal barrister was actually came through politics to start with, because it was only through being in that world that I started to kind of interact with people who were also involved in law. It's quite a common crossover, politics to law and vice versa. But then I think that perception is, politics is still a very white, male-facing world. Actually being in practice, working in different places where law is present, so places like the Law Centre, where I used to work as a paralegal, the Magistrates Court, and now at Mountford, you start to realise that that's not the way that it is in practice, particularly towards the junior end. And being in places like roving rooms across London has been very, very interesting in terms of, seeing more diversity than you expected. Realising that I actually fit in with people in terms of not just how I look, but my sense of humour, how I talk, listening to people's accents and experiences. And I think more effort needs to be made maybe to get that perception into places like schools, because I know when I was at school, I was the only one who wanted to be a barrister, and for a lot of people it just didn't feel like it was within reach because of their perception of it. So I think starting from that grassroots level when people are really young is really important.
Georgia, that's a fantastic answer. And one of the questions I wanted to move to was if you could think about what sort of role models you had, which were able, who inspired you to be able to make a step to the bar and actually make you believe that it was a career that you could have. Because we all know growing up as young women that women's faces were few and far between at the top of professions, and while that may be changing at the bar, the wheels do turn slowly, and I'm not sure if anyone's able to turn their mind to who it was that inspired them to first make the application and then make the leap to the bar. And did it start way back when you were at school? Were you one of the lucky people that had barristers come to school on careers days and spoke to people, or is it something you had to seek out? I don't know, Chloe, if you're able to kick us off on an answer to that one.
Yes, I had some exposure already to the criminal bar, as I do have a close family member who is a barrister. But what I would say is that while at university, I had really positive supervisors, or I think personal tutors, one of whom I think studied to be a barrister. I'm not sure she ever worked at the bar, but I used to talk to her a lot about her experience. And she was one of the people encouraging me to apply for bar school, because initially I think I was put off by the difficulty in attaining pupillage. I made a few kind of half-hearted applications for vacation schemes like commercial law firms, and then very quickly decided that I definitely didn't want to go down that route, and decided that I wouldn't be put off by the numbers and difficulties in getting pupillage. So she was very positive, and then since starting pupillage, I've been fortunate enough to meet a number of really amazing female barristers who have been quite impactful in showing you don't have to be a certain kind of way, you don't have to have a certain advocacy style, you can be successful in all manner of ways. So I would say that since coming to the bar, the number of women who've been quite inspirational has definitely doubled for me.
Has anyone else got any inspiring women that paved the way for them?
I would say for me personally, I come from a long line of strong Somali women. And the reason why I highlighted my ethnicity, it's one of the main reasons why I decided to become a criminal barrister, because I do believe, unfortunately, my people are overrepresented in the criminal justice system. And I know I'm not going to be superwoman and, you know, change lives, but if I could assist my community in any way, I wanted to do so while incorporating my interests. So I like criminal law, I like the independent nature of the bar, and I want to assist and I like talking. So being a criminal barrister for me was absolutely perfect. And I'm quite fortunate, you know, I have a very strong mother, very strong grandmother who always taught me to reach for the stars. That sounds very cheesy, very corny, but they never tried to inhibit my ambitions. They always told me to aim for the best. So those are the inspirational women in my life I wanted to give a shout out to in this podcast.
And Georgia and Grace, how about for both of you?
I would say, I think quite typically we often refer to female practitioners. I'd say for someone that comes from a non-law background, career advisors can really make or break or assist you. I was really lucky at the University of Law at Bloomsbury. There's a woman called Anna Williams, and I think she's still there. And I remember being at bar school and thinking, I don't have enough relevant work experience, you know, I'm not going to get any offers, I'm not going to get first rounds. And I went into her office the first day and she, you know, ripped me to shreds, told me my CV needed working, but that's absolutely what I needed at that point. And then I had a mentor, Fiona Robertson, and she's at Two Hair Court, and she really, really assisted in saying, go for it. The worst you can literally get is a no. And I think sometimes we're so in our heads that we forget that that is the worst that can happen. It's a no, but if you don't try, you won't know that it might possibly be a yes. So I definitely say we sometimes forget to, you know, shout out career advisors, especially law career advisors, but they can be so instrumental, as well as practicing people. So I'd say both of them.
And Georgia?
I have a couple of quite cheesy answers as well. So apart from having quite a few teachers who were very supportive, my mum was amazingly supportive of my career. She just was happy for me to do whatever I wanted to do, was happy to give me any help that I needed to actually get there, and was just always in my corner. And then actually since I started at Mountford, both my supervisors, Bozzy and Husler, have been amazing, and seeing them in the way that they work and the way that they are as people, they're just amazing, and it makes me realise that I'm in the right place, and I've got amazing support, and that I'm really, really lucky to be here, and that a career at the criminal bar that a lot of people from my particular background don't think is accessible can be. So throughout my career so far, I've had people in my corner and people who I can really look up to.
It's so lovely to hear your different experiences, and I think that's perhaps something that Anna and I can also attest to in some way, particularly the other women in Chambers and the support network that we have, and a very active WhatsApp group that seems to be able to solve most problems.
Solve all problems. Better than Westlaw. WhatsApp group.
But sort of on that note, that one of the things that International Women's Day really shines a light on, of course, it's about promoting inclusion and inspiring that, but that it's not limited to just the role of women within it, that everybody can be an ally in terms of gender parity. So in your respective experiences, are there any examples or male individuals you can point to who really have sort of had your corner and perhaps made a situation slightly better, or you've just felt a level of support that you've really appreciated?
I would say so. Even though things didn't work out for me at my previous set, my first supervisor, Salish Mehta, he helped me in feeling comfortable and belonging at the bar. That would be just taking me to conferences with him, to certain meetings, and just being exposed to the environment made me feel a sense of belonging that perhaps I struggled with. So it doesn't have to be these grand gestures. It can be really small things that you do for someone that just makes them feel like, okay, perhaps I can be in this room, I can have these conversations, and I do belong here. So that would be my example.
Yeah, that's incredibly important. And is that something that any of the rest of you have experienced?
Yes, so at school, the first teacher who actually helped me to try to get into the career and believed in me was my male politics teacher. He's from a very traditional, quite well-off background, but I felt comfortable going to him and saying that was something I wanted to pursue. And rather than kind of laughing at me or saying it wasn't possible, he was really, really determined to get me there. And really took me under his wing and recommended ways that I could, try to get into law at university or go and see barristers in practice. So he was really there for me.
So I have two examples. The first one being my GCSE English teacher, Mr. Oldham. And the reason why he had such an impact in my life is because he called me a diamond in the rough. And this is when I started to develop my written advocacy. He was my English teacher. It wasn't very good when I was in school, admittedly, even though I did get A stars in GCSE. Just putting it out there, it's self-flex. It wasn't good, and he said it could be good, but you just need to focus on this and that. And he was actually the first male teacher that really believed in me. And the experience that Gracie spoke about with one of her pupil supervisors, that's the experience I currently have with my current supervisor, Richard, in Chambers. He makes me feel comfortable. I'm becoming adjusted to life at the criminal bar. I'm robed whenever I do observe him. And just small things like that, being robed for the first time, it takes a while to get used to. It was such a weird feeling putting on that wig at Kingston Crown Court for the first time. So yeah, those are my two examples.
And Chloe, how about you? Have there been any sort of experiences of male counterparts who have perhaps inspired that inclusion and made you feel more comfortable in a situation that perhaps you didn't initially?
Yes, I've had a number actually of really positive experiences with male counterparts. Two actually, or three, are not necessarily in the legal field, but they pushed me into the legal field. My first was a really lovely teacher at school, my history teacher, Mr. Higgins, who pushed me into public speaking. He used to always have public speaking presentations during his classes, and I remember at one point he asked me to do a presentation in front of some younger years, and I was so nervous beforehand, but then I did it, I got through it, and it began to make me think maybe actually I can do public speaking, maybe I could be a barrister and stand up every day on my feet. And that led me to do some radio presenting while still at school, and two men running it were of course male radio presenters, and they really helped me with public speaking and being confident speaking live on air, which has been really invaluable experience since coming on my feet. And then since coming to the bar, both my supervisors in first and second six were both men, and I had a really positive experience with both of them. I learned a lot from both of them, and I was able to fall back on any questions I had, even really, I guess you'd say silly or mundane questions. They were always happy to help. So yeah, I've had a really positive experience both before and since coming to the bar.
And Anna, you came to the bar via a slightly different route as well.
Yes, I did. Would you like me to share this with the group?
Well, yes, please, of course.
Well, I'm Australian, so I transferred to transfer my qualifications to England and Wales, and I first transferred as a solicitor, and then having worked as a solicitor for 5 years, I crossed over to work as a barrister. I think when I was in Australia, I always wanted to be a barrister and wanted to move to the bar. But moving countries, it was difficult with all of the financial hurdles that come with the junior end of the bar and the precarious nature of trying to secure pupillage. So I went down a more safety route as a solicitor first. But I also remember when I first started working in England, I was in the robing room at the Bailey, and there was a formidable barrister who sadly passed away, Di Middleton, but she was a force of nature and was fantastic. And I just remember being in the robing room at the Bailey. I was paralegaling, I think, at the time, and she sort of looked at me and she just winked, and it just made me feel welcome, and that there was a place for any diverse women at the bar, and that sort of warmth and humour from people that you don't know, and then you might meet later on. will always stick with you. And in terms of feeling welcome and feeling that there is a place for you at the bar, that sort of those sorts of gestures are the types of things that do make you want to keep going and make you try and achieve the career that you always dreamed of. And when I went on to work with her, I always remembered that, and that she was always someone that clients and I think judges were scared of and clients loved, for someone sort of fierce advocacy like that, and is someone that has always inspired me. And so that was, when that happened early when I moved to the UK, I was like, yeah, there's a place for me here, and I'll keep working towards it. And when I've crossed over to the bar, I've always remembered that. And if you see someone junior in the robing room that might be looking a bit uncomfortable, I always try and reach out to them in whatever way you can, and whether it's talking to them or just saying hello. I think it makes people feel welcome and can encourage more people to continue to apply, and more women to continue to apply, and more women to continue becoming great barristers. So just wanted to share that story. It came to my mind when everyone was sharing their inspiration. So that is how I then arrived at Mountford and met all these wonderful women at this Chambers as well.
I think that's hugely important, and if you ask most people at the bar, and probably in other professions as well, they can pinpoint that one moment in time where someone just showed them some kindness and pulled them to one side and said, look, it's okay, and this is what you need to do, and that there's no element of, well, it was tough for me, so it needs to be tough for you. It's if the door's been held open for you, you keep it open for those coming behind you, and just having that more supportive environment, I think, tends to lead to better things than it does to make it unnecessarily difficult.
I mean, I definitely felt that with my first supervisor, Alexandra. So when I first entered the bar, it was a bit of a shock to the system. Just tiny things like the dress code, for example. I didn't know how conservative it was. And I said, you know what, she just pulled me to the side and said, listen, we don't do this here. It's about the client, it's not about you. And she instilled so many good habits in my first 3 months of pupillage, and I'm speechless. I can't thank her enough for every single piece of advice she's given me in the past, every lesson I've learned from her. And hopefully I get to pass on these lessons to other junior members in the future too. It's like a cycle.
Yeah, and certainly I always think if you're kind, then that will ultimately come back, and it will also benefit you in the long run. Like, you don't know when you're going to cross paths, and you don't know when your opponents, potentially you'll be co-defending with them one time. And I always find that if you're kind and respectful, then not only does it make it easier, but it also it will come back around, I think, and ultimately benefit you. So I will always remember those people that were kind to me at the beginning.
Yeah.
And it's always nice to think of and try and pay it forward.
So with that in mind, if you could speak to younger Georgia, Grace, Fatima and Chloe, what would you tell them?
I think personally I would tell younger me to just carry on doing what she's doing, that the dream that she had will happen a few years down the line, and that when she gets there will be lots of people like her who can help to guide her and show her the way, and who she can become great friends with while she's working.
I would say to my younger self, because I'm somewhat of a perfectionist, is to allow room for the unexpected, or for things not to go as you've planned. Just firstly on a mental health basis, you give yourself the grace to be okay when things don't go right, but also knowing or not knowing where things will end up might, exceed your expectations. So be okay with things not going to that set plan that you have.
I think the lesson I would give my younger self is just be kinder to myself. As I said at the beginning of this podcast, it took me 7 years to obtain pupillage, and in each of those years, even though I attained reserves, I really beat myself up about not getting the ultimate prize. I placed so much pressure on myself, and I wasn't kind to myself. So I'll tell my younger self, listen, chill a little bit, you know what I mean? So.
And Chloe, what would you tell the younger version of yourself?
I would just say to be confident, to trust myself, and to also ask myself, why not you? So my mum used to say that before all of my pupillage interviews. Someone has to get the pupillage offer, someone has to get taken on. Why shouldn't it be you? And sometimes that's all you need to kind of stand a bit taller and look someone in the eye and be that bit more confident. And that same kind of confidence is really helpful when you're on your feet, just to, make that difficult argument or that difficult submission. So I would just say yes, why not you?
Well, I think that's an incredibly important question for everyone to ask themselves. And with that in mind, that comes to a close of our podcast this evening. And thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.